Hi, this is Kathy Lewis at Tall Tree Designs, and today we're going to look at doing a Kitchener graft on a piece of work that's knit and stocking stitch. Do be careful, I do have another tutorial explaining Kitchener stitch grafting for garter stitch projects, and it is just a little bit different, so make sure you're watching the right tutorial for the fabric that you have. So this is stocking stitch, probably the most commonly used knitting stitch in knitting. And what I've done here, just to prepare for showing you the actual stitch, I cast my stitches on with a provisional cast on, knit to this point, and then I transferred the stitches from my provisional cast on back onto a needle. So what I've got is 2 edges of live knitting, and what I want to do is join them together. And the best way to do that is the Kitchener graft stitch because it's virtually invisible. It mimics the look of the knitting itself so that it's a very seamless look when you're done. So when I did this piece, I left myself a nice long tail that I can use to do my grafting, and I've threaded that tail onto a tapestry needle. To join these 2 edges, I want the wrong sides together, and I've lined up both rows of stitches just like this so that I can work with them and my tapestry needle. So, a couple of little setup things. First thing we do is we take our tapestry needle and go through the first stitch on the front needle as if to purl. And we're going to pull the tail through, not too tight, but we're not going to lift any stitches off the needle. We're going to go to the first stitch on the back needle, and we're going to insert the needle as if to knit. So it's the opposite. And same thing, pull that through, not too tight, and leave the stitch on the needle. That's our setup, and now we can carry on doing the grafting. First stitch on the front needle, insert your needle as if to knit and lift that stitch off. And then bring your tapestry needle through the second stitch on the front needle as if to purl and leave that stitch on the needles. We're going to switch to the back now, and again we're doing the opposite. We're going to bring our needle through the first stitch on the back needle as if to purl and lift that stitch off the needles, and then we're going to insert into the second stitch as if to knit and leave that stitch on our needles. Okay, we're going to do it again. Insert your needle through the first stitch on the front needle and lift that stitch off. Insert through the next needle as if to purl and leave that stitch on. Insert your needle purlwise through the first stitch on the back needle and lift it off. Insert your needle through the second stitch as if to knit and leave that stitch on. Are you starting to see the pattern? Knit, off the needle, purl, stays on the needle, purl, lift it off the needle, knit, leave it on the needle. Okay, and I'm just going to keep an eye as I go on how tight I'm pulling that because I don't want it to get too tight. At the same time, I don't want it to be so loose that it's visible. So I'm just speeding up and doing a few more. You're just going to repeat those steps until you have all the needles off the stitches. And you get into a bit of a rhythm. So where I use this technique a lot is making cowls. I'll knit a long rectangle or a long tube and then graft the ends together to form the circular shape of a cowl. The other place you'll see this used a lot is closing the toe of a cuff down sock. Just anywhere really. Sometimes designers will use this to graft the shoulders together on a sweater or another garment. And it's not nearly as hard as people make it seem, but it is worth those extra couple of steps. And you're going to see why in just a second. So my last stitches, that one comes off with a knit, that one comes off with a purl. And before I do anything too permanent, I'm just going to play with the tension a bit, stretch it out. And as you can see, we've created a little tube here with a virtually invisible join. Now here I could have pulled it a little tighter. But yeah, when you block that out, it's going to be even more invisible, and it's very, very secure. And then you're just going to secure that last stitch and weave your ends in. And it's a perfectly invisible join. So that is how you do Kitchener stitch grafting when you're knitting stockinette stitch.